What is up, my ninjas? I'm Strydent, and welcome to my review of the Neca Defenders of the Earth first wave of figures. These guys were kind of a surprise because I had resigned myself to just be like, fuck it, I'm not gonna find them because I haven't been seeing much NECA product around me. I got lucky with a few Ninja Turtles, but that's it. But this is a line that I have history with because when I was a kid, I was huge into these guys. I mean, this is like, you know how I talk about Kamen Rider and I talk about Ultraman and Ninja Turtles also. These are things that were big in my childhood. And the three guys here were definitely big. These were the guys my brother and I played with as children. This line so far has been pretty controversial because, there are people saying things about what they've run into with these figures. And I have a lot to say about that because I don't believe it in every situation, Obviously, people's mileage may vary, but, there are some things that you should be aware of going into NECA figures and figures in general, and I'm going to jump into that. I've heard so much drama surrounding these guys, so much about how crappy they are and how the QC is all over the place and blah 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 yakety schmackety, and then I happened across these guys. I wasn't looking for them. We just we always peek at the NECA section, and they just happened to have them. Three different three different Targets on three different trips, and I was just like, okay, shit, I'll pick them up. I almost didn't pick up the Phantom when I first got them because they were I picked him and McFarlane Shao Kahn up, and this is a substantially bigger figure than him, so I was expecting he was going to be extra. Turns out Shao Kahn was the cheaper of the two figures, which makes no sense, but this is the world we live in. Shao Kahn was $20 and the Phantom, all of these guys are 30. 30 a piece. I got lucky though because Ming he wasn't coming up the right price, so they the cashier just put 15 on there. So substantially less. I mean, I paid half for him, but these two I paid full price. But anyway, I didn't have any of the QC problems except for one, and that was across all the figures because there's some weird, I don't know if it was for the sake of speed, I don't know if it was for the sake of cost, cutting costs, because they come with some decent accessories, but they don't come with that much that you needed to do much to cut costs, you know what I mean? I have Predators and, some of my Arnold figures that came with much more, but cost less, And I can't imagine that King Features Syndicate characters are in high demand, But I've loved these characters since I was a kid, and after seeing so many bad reviews and so many people reporting that these figures were shit, I was like, all right, I'll just ignore it. So then when I was faced with the opportunity to pick up these guys, I was like, all right, let's see what they're made of, and I wasn't disappointed. These are some great figures. Now, what I think is the issue with a lot of people, and I've said this before in other videos, is that a lot of the people that we listen to on YouTube, a lot of the reviewers that you've come to expect to have the figure first, they manhandle their figures. They have fucking hammer hands. Plain and simple. Hammer hands all day, every day. Because 95% of the issues that they talk about, like, I've had them with other figures, like for instance, Flash had a stuck bicep joint, the bicep swivel, and a stuck hip joint. Because you know how this, their joint system is, it's a socket, it's like the ball, the universal joint at the hip with a socket sticking off the joint, and then on the other end you have the peg sticking off the joint, and the peg on this leg goes into the socket on the other leg, and then the two sometimes move in unison because of that. I mean, you can independently move them, but if you ever try to like pose the figure, you'll notice right away when you move leg A, leg B moves with it, you see? Because they're connected. This joint is inside the peg on that hip. But anyway, you have two things you could do to fix that. You could either freeze them, and then when you take them out of the freezer, turn the joints. It'll crack the paint loose, especially on these, because many of the joints are all the color of the majority color of each figure. So, you know, this is one of the Phantoms, obviously. And the same goes for his feet. The pegs on his ankles are like that, and the minute you put them in, they will flake and the paint will come off. That's the only issue I had across all of them, besides, you know, a couple stuck joints with these two. Ming was perfect out the box. I didn't have any issues with him at all. But it's one of those things where, like, you can either use the hot method or the cold method. Some people say use a blow dryer. I just boil water, drop them in the water, and then, you know, get them out of it. And when they're all nice and soft, you move everything where you want it, and then you run them under some, you know, regular cold water. It's nothing special. You don't need to go out and buy a fucking, you know, industrial hair dryer or some bullshit, you know, to do it just because a couple people do that, you know. It's unnecessary. You could just use hot water. You could boil some water, microwave some water, and then just put them in there. Or you can do the old-fashioned way. And this is what I've been doing since I was a little kid. Is when you know you have stuck joints, especially when it's paint related, just put them in the freezer. Let them sit for about, you know, 5 to 10 minutes. Bring them back out. Sometimes you can let them sit for longer. But you bring them back out, move the joints, and they'll crack. You'll hear psh, and then they'll move the way they're supposed to, because not only is the paint in that joint, but it's now the joints themselves are frozen. So you got to move them a little bit. You could either slowly move them and then they'll, you know, give, or you can just kind of quickly move them and they'll, you know, but you got to move them with the joint. Move with the joint. Move in the direction that the joints move. Don't try to move against the joint like the hammer-handed individuals like to do. Otherwise, you're just going to break your figure that you spent whatever amount of money on. And with some of them, you're not going to find extras, you know. I want to say with, let me see, Phantom, he was the only one there. And Ming, there were two Mings. When I found him, they had just put them all out. At that particular Target. But yeah, that's all I have as far as issues. So again, I want you guys to really pay attention to what I'm telling you. Don't always listen to, you know, what the popular folks say, and pay attention to what they're saying. I heard the same nonsense when it came to the 86 series, Studio Series 86 Jazz. They're like, oh, he has clear plastic for the canopy, you know, for his windshield. Essentially, all of the roof is all clear plastic. I've probably had one Transformer ever break because of clear plastic up top. Takara told me, and, you know, they use different plastics. They don't use the brittle plastic that we used to see a lot on NECA figures. So you don't have to worry about that kind of shit with them. They're hammer-handing things. They're forcing things too much, you know. Transformers have been coming with clear plastic since the beginning of time, and there's a way to handle them that you should know if you've been doing this for a little while. Now, if you haven't, that's different. That's where you're gonna have to, it's trial and error. You're gonna figure it out after you do it a couple times and you lose a couple, you know, or you crack a couple, or you see stress marks. Unless you're just one of those, you know, go for the gusto, force it with all your might, and then fuck it up, and then you're like, shit, now I'm out of Transformer, or whatever the figure is. Well, then that's on you. But if you're, you know, one of those people who takes care of the things that you get, and you don't handle your stuff like, you know, it's a Marvel Legends. Because, I mean, let's be real. A lot of people are kind of spoiled by the build quality of domestic figures that were aimed at kids. They're tough, you know what I mean? And they're meant to stand up to play. So wrenching them around and pushing them past where the joints are supposed to stop, a lot of times that's not going to break your Marvel Legend right away. But for other companies, you should know the difference, especially when we're talking about NECA. But what I've been finding strange on a lot of people is they're like, you know, the elbow joint broke or something, or the knee joint broke. You know how thick that knee joint is. Look at that. That's a lot. And folks are saying that easily broke. Same goes up here. That easily broke. That doesn't make any sense. You have to put a lot of effort into breaking something like that. So, I mean, just, you know, pay attention and figure out for yourself, you know, based on the information that's given, whether or not they're handling things the right way and you can trust what they're saying, or they're overdoing the amount of pressure that they're putting on certain joints and ending up with obviously, you know, with a break. Because, I mean, that's just par for the course if you're going to mistreat your figures. You know what I mean? Like, that's what happens. It's not rocket science. All right, now that I'm done with my PSA, you know, the more you know, let's talk about the Phantom, the Ghost Who Walks. Now, this was the first one I picked up when I was a kid, and I was a fan of him because of old comics. Homeboy's been around for almost as long as Batman and Superman. Showed up in 1936. He was created by Lee Falk. And I read the DC comic for a little while. And I also watched the cartoon Defenders of the Earth, and that's where the toys came in. The original toys looked like this. They had die-cast lower arm, like from their elbow down, you know, like their forearm to their fist. And they had a little punching action, and I played with them till their arms fell off. But all the details have been like recreated and surpassed here with these figures. From top to bottom, it's a faithful recreation of how he looked in Defenders of the Earth. And I love that. Like I said, I love those figures. Now it's weird because I love the figures. I didn't love the show as much. Flash Gordon, he's another classic hero. Been around since the early 30s, 1934. He was created and drawn by Alex Raymond back in those days. And he went on for a long time. I mean, they still, as far as I know, they're still publishing comics of Flash Gordon in some way, shape, or form. Now, unlike the Phantom, I didn't get into the comics for the Phantom. I mean, for Flash Gordon, I had no idea about the comics. I saw the movie from the 80s. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's not great from a technical standpoint, you know, even story, you know, narrative standpoint. It's a fun movie. It's campy. It represents the era perfectly. And yeah, that's what made me interested when I came across Defenders of the Earth. I was like, oh shit, Flash Gordon. Now the two characters feel like completely different characters. This one in this show feels like a seasoned, I don't know, soldier of some sort. Like he's been fighting Ming for a really long time. And yeah, I had this toy, and I played with this toy until his lower arms fell off. And yeah, it was awesome. But you know, everything that I loved about that figure is on display with this new figure, which, I mean, that's kind of the point, you know what I mean? All the details were kept extremely faithful to how he appeared in Defenders of the Earth, and you know, every related piece of media. I mean, and that's what you want with these NECA figures. I mean, it's literally what they're capitalizing on. Ming the Merciless. This is another figure that my brother had him, so I played with the good guys. He was Ming, and he came up with the schemes. Now, Ming is both awesome and controversial at the same time. He's one of those thinly veiled, it's not even veiled, he's just a racist caricature of, you know, Asian xenophobia or racism in general. And during that time period, that was a big thing. You know, they did that with black folks too. But this is why I dug the movie version, which is what I came across first, because the movie version felt more alien. Yes, he has a Fu Manchu. Yes, his name is Ming, but you can see from the designs, it's not particularly Asian. It's super European. But back in the day, he was depicted essentially as Fu Manchu in space, you know, and he was an evil Chinese, you know, space Chinese emperor. And that sucks. They should have leaned more into the alien stuff, which is why I like this version, and my brother dug this version, and many of us dig this version. Unfortunately, in the show, he's just not that badass, you know. But here's the old figure, so you can see what it looked like back in those days, and my brother played with him until his arms freaking fell off. But, I mean, you see that everything is here. It's all on display. And like I pointed out earlier, I mean, that's what NECA is really good at, and that's the thing that they are kind of winning us over with the most. But Ming, of the three, Ming is the most detailed by far. He's got all kinds of things going on all over the place. There's alienish details. There's, you know, 1930s sci-fi details, like the headdress, like the weird sundial pieces on his chest and on, you know, holding his cape on. That, of course, there's the throwbacks to his somewhat Asian-inspired design with the dragon on the lower portion of his tunic. His rings are all well detailed. I mean, the bands on his wrists. I mean, granted, you know, things get a little spotty as you get a move around on the hands, but the essence of the nails and the rings, you know, for a mass-produced figure, this is, you know, a retail release. This is pretty amazing. The collar, look at all that, you know. And then, of course, the piece de resistance is his beautiful wired cape, his soft goods cape, which I don't know why this isn't just standard with 6-inch figures. I mean, if you're going to raise the price, you're going to make it 6 inches, the cape needs to have posability. And I think that just sets off the figure perfectly. I mean, what else would you want, you know? So accessories. These guys come with a ton of accessories combined. Each of them kind of come with the same stuff, which is kind of weird, with the exception of like a couple specific things. And then, you know, there's a bonus piece that I'm going to give you guys in a sec. But well, I'll start with the Phantom. He comes with extra hands, you know, one for the gun and one for an effect piece. He comes with his gun. He comes with 2 different laser effects and then a third effect for his ring. So you have the just standard muzzle flare, which looks really nice. And I'm not going to do this with Flash or with Ming, because it's the same all across the board. You have the short, the flash, and then you have the actual laser itself, the beam. And I dig it. I dig it. It looks really nice. Gets the point across, and as you can see from different angles, it looks cool. I like to have him use 2 guns, so I give him Ming's gun, because I don't see why Ming would be running around with a gun when he has his special rings. Speaking of rings, the 2 signet rings are present on the Phantom's fists, but you get an extra fist, I want to say his right fist, where the ring itself is missing, so that you can attach a beam piece similar to the one that fires off the gun, except instead of having a piece that goes around the barrel, it's a peg that goes into that hole. So you can have him shooting off a beam of energy, just like he did in the intro to the TV show. He also did that in an episode of the TV show, shooting a beam out of his signet ring and burning the skull into Ming's hand. It's kind of funny because, you know, they really exaggerated the hell out of what these rings do. Next we have Zuffy. He's kind of like the pet character that they had, little cutesy alien pet dude, and he's holding the crystal that is kind of like a hard drive that has Dale Arden's, you know, Flash's wife, her consciousness on it. That was one of the darker aspects of this TV show compared to, like, you know, other Saturday morning cartoons. But at that time, a lot of them were dark. Anyway, Flash Gordon has same pieces as the Phantom. I just pretty much make him use the sword, so he can swashbuckle, because in the comics he did swashbuckle a lot. And to be fair, he swashbuckled a ton in the movie. It was a lot of that. So him and Ming can go at it, and it looks cool because Ming would be using his staff, because he's another one who came with strange, a little more than what he needed, but I get it. I understand exactly why. And can we take just a little bit of time to go back and marvel at how clean this sword is? It's literally like a light saber, like a light or light broadsword, and it looks beautiful. I mean, look at that. It's so nice. And then, of course, we have paint flakes, because you will be left with a ton of them when you try to switch out the hands on these guys. And then Ming has a lot of the same stuff you got before. Strangely enough, he has a gun but doesn't come with an extra gun hand. Instead, he comes with an extra, like, gnarly, dramatic hand. And then he has his sword and his staff. The staff is beautiful. It looks like Mongo, his, I think he's called Mongo, the dragon pet that he has in the TV show. And it's wonderful. And while I was doing research for pictures, trying to get pictures for some of the stuff that I showed you when I was explaining who the characters are, I learned that they made a toy of Mongo. I would have loved that when I was a kid. But anyway, the staff is just beautiful, and it sets him off perfectly. It almost feels like he doesn't need anything else, but then they gave him the sword, and the sword works really well for him as well. But I love the staff. I mean, the staff, to me, that just sets it off. The sword is beautiful. The paint job is amazing. There's little things in these packages that kind of give you somewhat a feeling of justification for why the cost is so high. But everything looks good. I don't really have any slop anywhere, and I'm up close on these things, and you see it yourself. There's no slop. Look at that little red piece at the very end of the handle. It's just like, how do they do this, for a domestic retail figure? It's fucking beautiful, I figure rather than twisting up the figure in a traditional articulation section, I will just let the pictures speak for themselves, so you can see the poses I put them in, see how their feet and ankles and knees are moving, see the torso articulation. They have it all. They move better than most NECA figures. And like I said, with mine, once I did the cold technique on them, or cold method, all the joints that were stuck on the figures that had stuck joints, they all came free. And as you can see, they're able to do all kinds of stuff. The double jointed elbows work, double jointed knees work, no issues with thighs. The swivels work on their thighs as well, because they have like an anatomically correct thigh swivel, as you can see in this picture here. The wrist joints work really well. Head movement is awesome. I will say Flash has kind of a little bit of bobblehead action going on. It's a little loose, but that's really it. These guys are a joy to pose, and you can see I had fun, because look at the amount of poses I did. So yeah, quality. All right, let's compare. We've got the Jazzwares Fortnite Peely figure, Mezco Green Arrow, McFarlane Mandarin Spawn, SH Figuarts Akiba Red, and then the Hasbro Marvel Legends MCU Black Panther, and the Lightning Collection SPD Pink Ranger. They all scale up pretty well. They're supposed to be kind of like specimens, big dudes, with that classic look, and these guys fit that bill, so no issues there at all. So the bottom line, my favorite part. So what we have here is a release that is mired by people mishandling their figures, and some QC, because I'm not even going to pretend like NECA is not synonymous with poor QC, you know, and brittle materials. But in this case, I don't believe that all across the board, like you're hearing on Instagram and Facebook, and, you know, I don't believe all across the board it's shitty QC. A lot of it is the way people handle their figures. You see it in reviews, you know, people just twist the shit out of people, especially when they're doing the splits, when they try to show you that a figure does the splits, or like when they say, oh, the head does a 360, and it's like, why does a human head need to do a 360? You need to be careful just in case there's a ratchet or a catch. Figuarts and some other companies do that sometimes too. But overall, these figures, as long as you know, are careful with them and you do the methods, the cold or the hot method, you will be able to play with these figures and pose them. And as you can see, the sculpt and paint is on point, articulation is on point, accessories are really good. There's not much else to ask for, you know what I mean? Now, you know, remember, I can't stress it enough. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Do not handle these figures like they're Marvel Legends or something. Otherwise, you're probably going to be sorry. Other than that, this is some straight up A+ stuff. Get them if you see them. Be wary of the price. And that's it for me. You've been great. Peace outside.